everyone. Welcome back to this week's broadcast of Water, Wind, Wine Ministries. And I wanted to talk to you tonight about Romans chapter 14, verse 23, that does not say that anything that's not faith is sin. Sorry that I'm in the car. This is the only free time I have this week, basically, to get this video recorded. So I hope you'll give me some grace. I just opened with Romans. Proverbs is on the brain. Romans chapter 14, verse 23, that says that whatever is not from faith is sin. It does not say whatever is not faith is sin. And that's a really important distinction. Have you ever actually thought about that distinction? Maybe you have, but I hadn't for a while. And I think that I used that as a little bit of a weapon against other people, but was afraid a little bit to turn that to myself. So in Romans, for context, in Romans chapter 14, Paul is talking about, what we can do and what we can't do in terms of eating and our freedom. There were things in the Old Testament that the Jews weren't allowed to eat, like anything that wasn't kosher. They weren't allowed to eat. Well, when Jesus came, everything became pure and clean and okay, right? But sometimes in the Old Testament, when they transitioned from the old to the new, some Jews would get all worked up because they grew up thinking, maybe pork was bad for them and they were not allowed to eat it. It was a sin. And then when they met Jesus, then they were technically free from that, but their minds wouldn't allow them to be free. So if you back up in Romans 14, it says that if it's a sin to that person, then it's a sin, right? And that doesn't mean is if I think something's a sin, that automatically makes it a sin. Like I've heard, some denominations say that women wearing makeup is a sin, and they've used that little piece of that verse that if a man thinks something's a sin, then it's a sin. And I can understand where they're going with that, but it's very clear in Romans 14 that if it's a sin to the person, then it's a sin to that person, okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a sin according to God, okay? So that's really important, first of all. Second of all, we've already been delivered from all of our sin because of Jesus Christ. Hebrews chapter 9. Okay. So, this whatever is not from faith is sin. I think if you're like me, you want to know what that means so that you don't get into sin, right? I mean, it makes sense. And what that means in context is he's talking about eating. He's talking about if you say in the case of a Jew, they're going to eat pork for the first time and they're not going to hold themselves to account for being sinful. If they say, Lord, I believe that Jesus Christ has redeemed me from all sin and that he's made everything pure and clean, that this is not a sin if I eat this pork, and they do that from faith, that what Jesus did was enough to make it not necessary for them to avoid pork, then they would not be in sin. On the contrast, if they still considered it sinful and went ahead and ate and like, oh, I hope nothing happens, I hope I'm going to be okay, that kind of fear, striving with themselves and striving with their conscience thing, then it is sin to them. And it is sin, right? And that's really important, and I'll get to that in just a second. But when I first learned this, for me, it was everything that is not faith is sin. And that's not what the verse says. It says everything that's not from faith is sin. So what I had to do for me was I had to really examine why I did certain things or didn't do certain things. And I had to really say, am I doing or not doing this because I actually believe that God has redeemed me from sin, and this is not sinful. And alcohol use was one of those things. I was very concerned about alcohol use. Sorry, there was somebody on the side of the road kind of running anyway, I was very concerned about alcohol use when I first really learned this principle. And I don't drink now, just mostly because I break out stupid every time I drink. But it was fine. But I did struggle with alcohol use and knowing whether that was a sin or not. And so to me, it was a sin. And what's really important about this is that if you have a place, do you have a place in your life where you're kind of struggling, where you're like, I don't know if that's okay or not okay. You know, if that's covered under the blood, or we should not be doing that, or whatever, if you're unclear. And I'm not talking about things that are clear, like murder or lying or beating somebody up or something like that. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about little things like eating certain things or drinking certain foods or saying a certain thing. You know, maybe there's a word. I got told that you're not supposed to say stupid. Well, stupid is in the Bible. But anyway, you understand what I'm getting at here. So if you're struggling with that, if you're not, that's awesome. But if you are, what I did was that like I said, I went to all these things, all these places in my life, and I examined them, and I said, am I doing this out of faith or out of fear, basically? Because what we'll tend to do is we'll tend to say, oh, I'm going to make this decision to do or not to do this thing, and it's wise. And we haven't consulted the Lord on it at all. We don't actually know if it's wise. We just think it's wise. And that thinking it's wise is based out of fear. We're afraid of something, right? Like, I've heard people say stuff like that they go to the doctor every year for a checkup because it's wise. Meanwhile, they're afraid of getting everything that comes down the line. So they're not actually being wise. They're actually afraid, and they don't want to admit it. And that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm saying, is that this, whatever is not from faith, is sin. When you have not gone to God and said, Lord, I'm going to do this, and I believe that Jesus has redeemed me, or has delivered me, or has healed me, or whatever. If you haven't done that preemptively, but you make a decision to just go with the flow, then you're in sin. And the problem with that is that that's what's going to open the door to the devil to attack you. Does that make sense? Is that landing with any of you? Let me know in the comments. What it looked like for me was that I told you I was struggling with drinking alcohol. And we're not talking like getting crazy drunk. We're talking about just drinking a couple glasses of wine and made me stumble a little bit. I was a little bit concerned about it. And I knew other Christians that drank wine, and they didn't seem to have any negative ramifications from drinking wine, but I did. And when I say negative ramifications, I mean that breaking out a stupid thing. That's not a joke. I mean, it kind of is funny, but I do really stupid things and cause all kinds of drama in my life for absolutely no reason, needless drama. It's because what I was doing, I was just like, oh, Jesus redeemed me from this, so I'm just going to do it. But I didn't examine my heart and say, Lord, I like to have a glass of wine now and then, and I believe that Jesus has redeemed me from any kind of curse that would come on me about this, or any kind of retribution for sin, or payment for sin, because it's all covered under Jesus. So I'm trusting you that I'm okay, Lord, and that you're going to keep me from going overboard. That would have been the right thing for me to do. So I prayed about it, and I took a few minutes with the Lord, and I was very vulnerable and with Him, and let Him walk me through that. So what I'm asking you to do is maybe just take a few minutes and examine your heart and ask the Lord to reveal anything that you might need to examine that might be from fear and not from faith, where you're getting into sin and don't know it. And if you're not, that's great. If you just want to take a few minutes with the Lord and do that, that's also fine. But if you're not, that's fine. Anyway, I just want to encourage you that the Bible does not say whatever's not faith